Hey YNR fans! Waving hand, welcome to YNR Trends, your go-to spot for the juiciest Young and the Restless updates, shocking spoilers, and all the drama you can't stop talking about. From surprise returns to scandalous twists, we break it all down for you, every day. So grab your coffee, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive right into Genoa City's hottest gossip. According to spoilers for the upcoming 3 weeks of The Young and the Restless, which run from August 18th to September 5th, Sharon Newman will discover that she is unable to give up. There will be some intriguing obstacles in Genoa City as Kane Ashby demands results and Sally Spectra faces a difficult situation. Claire Newman's blabbing and Nate Hastings' pressure throughout the week of August 18th to 22nd will make Audra Charles answer for her appalling actions. Holden Novak will snap at Daniel Romalotti Jr. while Nate is furious over Audra's breakup plan for Victor and all the other shady things she's done to Kyle Abbott. Holden will worry that Daniel was hired by Kane to get information and get dirt since he will ask too many questions. After denying that, Daniel will come to appreciate Tessa Porter in entirely different ways. Daniel will desire more than friendship the more time he spends with Tessa. He'll make a startling choice with Victor Newman that might surprise even his closest loved ones. Victor might pull a power move that his family isn't prepared for. Regarding Phyllis, she will take on Kane's first task and risk a lot, provided it entails the hacking he asked for. Phyllis will have to demonstrate her value since Kane will be quite clear that he expects results. Audra might make an unsuccessful attempt to mend her damaged connection with Nate over the week of August 25th to 29th. Kyle and Claire had better keep an eye on Audra because this can arouse her resentment and make her want retribution. If Audra ultimately chooses to accept her friend's employment offer, Sally might also be faced with a difficult choice. Given how spectacularly Audra's life has blown up, could Sally reconsider that offer? Audra's impetuous actions and self-centered nature could make her a liability. Here, we're not exactly discussing an excellent team player. Sally was placed in charge by Billy Abbott, but there may still be some conflicts over hiring decisions at Abbott Communications. Sharon might be on a mission relating to motherhood during the week of September 1st to 5th. When it comes to supporting her daughter, Sharon cannot simply give up, even though Mariah Copeland pressured her to back off and threatened to separate herself if she didn't listen. According to YNR teasers, Sharon will unavoidably try to help Mariah and encourage her to open up again at some point. Mariah may one day divulge the entire repressed stranger experience if Sharon manages to catch her at a very vulnerable time. She might be able to get the 3 bridal gown selections she promised Christine Blair with Lauren Fenmore Baldwin. Although Christine and Danny Romalotti aren't being married until October, Lauren will undoubtedly want to finalize the bridal gown selection well in advance of the wedding. Lastly, Victor's marriage to Nikki Newman may suffer as a result of his Jabot takedown efforts. Nikki might be tempted to undermine their efforts and attempt to assist Jack in saving his family business if the Newmans team up with Kane on this, as Victor desires. Something like that might enrage Victor and cause him to clash with Nikki in the near future. According to teasers for The Young and the Restless, Victor will need to modify his tactics along the way. Stay tuned for more details on his conflict with Jack. Long after the coffee shop had closed, Sharon waited there as the neon lights outside faded into Genoa City's dark silence. The coffee was cold but nevertheless acting as her anchor as her hands closed around a mug she had already filled 3 times. Now, when everything inside her cried out that she was on the verge of losing control once more, she could not give up. She was perceived by others as the center of peace, the lady who had recovered from loss, pain, and innumerable betrayals, but she was aware that she was still fragile, tormented, and carrying a heart that was too heavy to let go. Sharon found herself grappling with the same question she had been grappling with for weeks. Was she strong enough to keep the past hidden, or would it eventually find its way back to her doorstep? The night was silent except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Sally Spectra looked at her mirror across town, gazing at her image as though she could ask the woman in the mirror to tell her anything. She was in a difficult situation, and no amount of practiced justifications or hushed encouragement could make her chest stop churning. Sally had always been a fighter, brash, unrepentant, and prepared to break the law to save her life, but this was something else entirely. None of the options she had in front of her were safe or clean. Adam and Nick's unbreakable bond tormented her like an unfinished song, while Nick's devotion pulled at one side of her heart. And now, like an unexpected storm cloud, Kane's test results threatened to tip the scales in a way she couldn't have foreseen. Deep down, Sally feared that this time there would be no way out without scars, but she lowered her head and pushed her palms against the dresser, muttering that she would figure it out. Kane Ashby, on the other hand, sat with papers in his hands and a pulse that was louder than the wall clocks ticking in the hospital's sterile waiting area. Words printed in a clinical typeface, statements that, depending on how he read them, could either break or save, were the results. This felt heavier, as if fate had chosen to see if he still had a place in Genoa City at all after his life had fallen apart so many times before due to lies, blunders, broken marriages, and betrayals. With his eyes closed, Kane saw Lily's voice, the only thing that had ever broken through his chaos, flickering in his head like an old loop of film. Fear restrained him to the chair, preventing him from running to her and telling her what he had found. What would happen if these outcomes ruined his last hope of salvation? What if there was no turning back because of the truth? Disregarding the pain in her chest, Sharon poured herself another cup of coffee. She reflected on how readily she had been told to give up, to accept the things she couldn't alter, and to leave the fragments of her past where they had fallen. However, Sharon wasn't made that way. To surrender was to be weak. Giving up meant leaving the people she cared about to uncontrollable forces. She reflected on Nick, how dependable he had been, and how he had always been her safe haven. However, there was no assurance even with him. Sharon was self-aware enough to understand that love alone would not be sufficient to ward off her inner demons. Even if it meant holding on with bloodied fingertips, she had to hang on. She sat there for that reason, refusing to get up or give in to the fatigue that was putting pressure on her bones. Sally's fists twisted together as she paced her flat. Her shoulders were burdened by the weight of her covert choices. The challenge was to survive in a society that constantly criticized her, not just about who she loved or who she would pick. She had put in a lot of effort to establish a name, a career, and the confidence to stand tall in a room full of people who mocked her past. She now had to make a decision that could ruin everything she had worked so hard to achieve. Adam provided passion, an unbreakable relationship that felt like fire in her veins, while Nick provided protection and a sense of calm she had never experienced. Sally detested herself for not being able to leave clean, since choosing one meant betraying the other. Beneath it all was Kane, his outcomes, his link to a reality Sally couldn't really comprehend but believed would inevitably enter her life whether she wanted it to or not. At last, Kane forced himself to open his eyes and read the lines once more. They could not be avoided. He had no reason to mistrust the results because they were unquestionable and absolute. His breath was erratic and his stomach twisted. These outcomes meant revelation, transformation, and potentially far-reaching repercussions for the entire town. He considered how he was already perceived by others, with distrust, with mistrust, as a man who had repeatedly attempted to rebuild but failed. He was now in possession of something that had the power to completely define or destroy him. Leaning back on the chair, he closed his eyes again and pressed the paper against his chest. Kane desired for the first time in a long time that someone would enter the room and give him instructions. However, nobody showed up. As the hours passed slowly, Sharon eventually got up from her chair and made her way to the coffeehouse's entrance. The cold, harsh, relentless night air struck her like a whisper of reality. She tried to calm the storm inside of her by closing her eyes and taking a deep breath. She was unable to give up. Never, ever. Despite not saying it aloud, they needed her. Nick, her friends, and her kids. Even when it seemed impossible, she had to keep battling. Sharon also realized deep down that her refusal to give up wasn't solely for herself. She wanted to show everyone who had ever questioned her that she was more resilient than her wounds. At last, Sally sat on the side of her bed, deciding whether to call Adam or Nick, while holding her phone. She was unable to contact both because doing so would reveal her weakness. But it felt like drowning to do nothing. Her mind was racing with possibilities and her heart ached with confusion, all of which pointed to a terrifying future. She considered how secrets in Genoa City never remained hidden, how Kane's findings would have an impact on everything, and how one revelation could plunge everyone into anarchy. "What should I do?" she said into the quiet. However, the sound of her own faint breathing was all that could be heard in the solitude. Finally, Kane rose up and put the papers in his jacket pocket. Despite the weight on his legs, he pushed himself in the direction of the exit. He was unable to hide indefinitely. Someone would have to find out. Kane couldn't deny the reality. Even when panic gripped his chest, outcomes like these weren't just his responsibility. They were a spark, and in Genoa City, sparks always ignite everything they come into contact with. The interwoven stories of Kane's results, Sally's dilemma, and Sharon Can't Surrender offer a sophisticated examination of moral dilemma, human frailty, and the fallout from unsolved emotional conflicts. Despite having different people and situations, all of the stories share themes of resistance, internal turmoil, and the frequently unpleasant results of relationships and personal choices. A more thorough analysis of these three arcs shows how people struggle with surrender, whether it is to fate, truth, or love, and how their refusal or incapacity to do so affects both their own lives and the lives of others around them. The protagonist of Sharon Can't Surrender is a woman who is deeply ingrained in emotional self-preservation. Because of previous betrayals, she is resistant to vulnerability and finds it difficult to completely trust or give up control in her relationships. Although this emotional armor protects her from harm, it also keeps her apart from real human connection. The dread of being injured again is a universal human worry that, ironically, guarantees ongoing pain via loneliness, and Sharon's battle is representative of this fear. Her refusal to give up is not just a personal shortcoming, rather, it is a defense mechanism that is so embedded in her that it controls her behavior and frequently results in self-destruction. The story compels the reader to consider whether it is possible to live a life free from the need for forgiveness or love. According to Sharon's experience, resistance can provide momentary security but eventually results in stagnation because emotional development necessitates a certain amount of surrender. Sally's dilemma, on the other hand, highlights a distinct aspect of resistance that is based on moral ambiguity and self-deception. Sally finds herself torn between her moral commitments to help people and her desire for personal happiness. Her predicament involves more than just picking right from wrong, it also involves negotiating the gray regions where relationship or societal expectations collide with personal fulfillment. Sally's resistance is cognitive in nature, as opposed to emotional like Sharon's. She justifies her decisions by telling herself that they are acceptable even when they hurt people around her. The human propensity to evade responsibility by rephrasing judgments in a more agreeable way is highlighted by this internal conflict. The ramifications of unresolved challenges are highlighted in Sally's story. Her incapacity to face the full weight of her decisions results in growing complications, proving that avoiding problems only makes them worse rather than better. Kane's results, on the other hand, focuses on the results of resistance, the observable consequences of defying the truth or the conditions. Whether it's against fate, authority, or his own limitations, Kane's storyline is one of resistance. He acts in a more destructive manner as a result of his inability to accept reality, whether it be failure, loss, or personal imperfections. Kane's resistance is externalized, showing up as acts that disturb not just his life but also the lives of others, in contrast to Sharon and Sally's inner resistance. His outcomes, the fallout from his obstinacy, act as a warning about the perils of unbridled disobedience. Although resilience is frequently praised, the story implies that there is a thin line separating self-destruction from tenacity. Some conflicts cannot be won by pure willpower alone, as Kane's failure to adjust or recognize his limitations serves as an example. When analyzed collectively, the three stories create a tapestry of human resistance. Kane's stubborn defiance, Sally's moral evasion, and Sharon's emotional guardedness all serve as examples of how people avoid facing unpleasant realities. The basic premise that resistance, although occasionally essential for survival, can turn into a prison if ignored is what unites these tales. Refusing to give up, whether to reality, love, or responsibility, results in a vicious circle of pain that only ends when one decides to be vulnerable, honest, or accepting. These arcs also examine how relationships are impacted by personal resistance. Loved ones feel excluded as a result of Sharon's emotional distance, which affects her relationships. As others around Sally get tired of her avoidances, her hesitation and self-justification undermine trust. Kane's unrelenting disobedience alienates supporters, converting their possible support into annoyance or desertion. Every story illustrates how personal resistance affects the larger network of human connections, frequently in ways that the resistant person is unaware of. The idea of control has a deeper psychological undercurrent in these stories. On some way, Kane, Sally, and Sharon all oppose surrender because they worry about losing control over their lives. Kane cannot handle the thought of being helpless, Sally fears the condemnation that comes with taking responsibility, and Sharon confuses weakness with vulnerability. Their difficulties are a reflection of the basic human need to control one's own story, even if such control is just seen. Naturally, the irony is that their resistance frequently results in more disorder, weakening the very control they are trying to uphold. Each story's resolution, or lack thereof, further highlights the price of resistance. It's possible that Sharon's story will conclude with her still imprisoned in her emotional stronghold, implying that she will continue to be alone if nothing is done. Sally's predicament could cause irreparable harm, demonstrating how protracted hesitation can block paths to forgiveness. Kane's outcomes could be disastrous and serve as a sobering reminder of the dangers of unbridled disobedience. The idea that resistance, when taken too far, results in existential or relational bankruptcy is further supported by these sad or unresolved ends. In the end, Kane's results, Sally's dilemma, and Sharon can't surrender all examine the human condition, our imperfections, our anxieties, and how we deal with, or avoid, the unavoidable surrenders that life requires. Refusing to give in is portrayed as a survival strategy as well as a possible route to self-destruction, regardless of whether it is emotional, moral, or existential. The reader is prompted by the stories to consider their own resistances. What are we holding on to, and at what price? Resilience turns into rigidity at what point? And how may the paradoxical secret to freedom be in submission in all its manifestations? These tales provide a critical counterweight to a society that frequently values strength as unwavering resistance by reminding us that sometimes having the guts to let go is what truly demonstrates strength.